Hi, welcome to Series 8 of our podcast series. Today is all about exports, sales and strategy, and really just helping, anybody who's in that export, whether quoting sales guys or commercial team or even just the export team, just understanding that building the perfect quote. It sounds a bit, well, everybody builds a perfect quote, but actually we see lots of challenges within that. So today is all about building the perfect quote to protect your profit margin, protecting export margins in global trade, because you get one chance at this, and once it's written down and once it's sent to your customer or your buyer, he assumes that's the price. You need to make sure you're fully covered, because if you're not covered, it becomes a disaster or particular disaster. So export sales success, a quote is not just the price. Remember that when you're quoting, you've got lots of things to think about. You may be 6 months, 8 months, a year in advance in some cases. You might be waiting for raw materials to come in. So when you're quoting, you're relying heavily on your manufacturing process to make sure you've got everything in stock. You might be working on a 3 to 4 to 5 month lead time, or you could be just in time. And if you're just in time, what are you actually quoting for? Because what's the customer's expectation? Remember, he's on the other side of the globe, or he's in Europe, or wherever he is. He's expecting them goods tomorrow, or he wants them tomorrow. You know yourself when you're buying goods, you want them tomorrow. You know that's not realistic. But again, if you make it very clear on your quotation, it keeps any expectations very clear. And that's very important when we talk about sales. Where are the biggest export mistakes? So when you're doing your quotation, it's very important to understand your Incoterms. Don't be pushed into an Incoterm. An Incoterm has to be agreed by two parties. It can't be forced on you. So don't let it be forced on you. Understand an Incoterm. Understand where the risk and exposure is. We talk so much on Incoterms. Remember, if it's X works and it's you're selling X works, what's the exposure to the buyer? But what's also the exposure to from a customs compliance side? A lot of people misunderstand this, and sales people, get very excited, sell it from door. It's up to the customer to come and collect it. I'm invoicing it. If they take 2 weeks to collect it, I've invoiced it, I don't care. But actually, further down the line, when you have a customs audit, the whole everything starts to, open up, because unfortunately there are a lot of challenges from an export declaration and all sorts of other things that you have to think about. VAT elements, what you have to think about with the HMRC, that's in the UK, and that'll be the same worldwide, not obviously with HMR, but you'll have different taxes you have to think about. Customs, what's your exposure? Ignore, what is the cost, what's being delivered? Is he expecting you to pay that? Is he expecting you to do DDP? Is that in his mind, that 6% and 20% VAT, or 20% tax, or 18% VAT? Is he expecting you to absorb that 24%? Well, your quotation has to be very clear, because ultimately you could sell them goods with a 25% margin on it. It goes out and you've had all extra costs, and you've not really thought about the duty and the VAT and the taxes, because you haven't thought about your Incoterm. Two very key things. Currency risk, what you're quoting in. Be very clear. Is it in euros, dollars? Is it in GBP, UK? What is it? And if it's in their exchange, have you built enough exchange in there? Have you built some security in there where there's a 5% shift? You can then change the quotation. Very, very important. Freight charges. Who were the expectations? Who's paying the freight charges? What's he expecting? Is he expecting to wait 30 days, 40 days, 50 days on CVs in Australia? Or is he expecting to wait a week? That has a huge bearing on your freight charges, because depending on your Incoterm, you then have the risk of paying them costs. So if you've got air freight and you've built in a marginal cost because you've had some sea freight cost, well, triple, quadruple that cost. And in a very volatile market with a lot of obviously issues within Iran, we're seeing a lot of less flights. Well, there's not less flights, but that's the talk, and that's a way of the structure. So you could be really caught up in an exposure where your costs don't only double, quadruple, where you lose all your profit before you even move the goods when you put them on a plane. And are they expecting that within your quotation? Have you built that on multiple jobs? So that poor quote structure is very important. Again, don't assume. Never assume in international trade. Never assume that your buyer is thinking the same as you. We talk a lot about this, about cultural differences, what their culture is, and there's nothing wrong with it. Expectations to what our culture expectations are is completely different. So again, just understand that. Commodity codes, incorrect commodity codes. You assume your commodity code is 84495 and it's zero duty. But actually, you could be into the 90s. You could be in other areas where there's a trigger of also commodity codes, but also extra charges in there. There could be anti-dumping in there. There could be some some remedies in there. There could be some countervail. There could be all sorts in there. And suddenly your goods arrive and they get stopped at border ports or customs, and it opens a can of worms. So again, wrong commodity cost, very important. And use 8 digits when you're exporting. Stop using 10. I know I sound like an old record player, but stop using 10 digits. Since when did you use 10 digits? How do you know what the last 2 digits are in the country you're shipping into? Okay, be DDP, which you shouldn't be doing, but you'd be doing. But 8 digits, that's your national code. You have no idea what the national code is in Brazil or somewhere else. So don't put yourself in that situation. It's 8 digits and that's it. It's up to your importer to sort that. What do we see? The cost trap, freight volatility, insurance. Have we got insurance? Remember, Incoterms don't insure your goods. Your freight forwarder or your airline does not insure your goods. He insures the liability, but he takes out a policy because obviously, he doesn't want to damage anything or lose anything, but he takes out a liability. But he only pays you on the liability. He's not going to pay you full value unless you've insured it fully with him, because otherwise you wouldn't have a business, because unfortunately millions and millions of shipments going out there, things do get lost, things do get damaged, not because they mean to do it, just things happen. It's just the sheer volume of traffic. Your goods are being multiple used or multiple collections and moved many times. And in most cases it works tremendously well. That's why your packaging is so important. Again, customs clearance, tariffs, port storage charge. You end up at the port, you argue about something, and then before you know it, you've spent another £1,000 on demurrage, which you didn't expect. Returns exposure, if it's not working in border ports or customs are not happy, they'll send them goods back to you at your cost. So again, margin erosion, delayed payments, customs disputes or customer disputes, reduce profitability. Export profit is lost before the shipment even moves. And I know I keep going on and on about this, but that's the importance about today's topic. Professional quote, non-negotiable. Clear Incoterms, clear currency and validity. So again, at what point does that stop? If it's 6 months in advance in the audit, well, you quoted it for a month. You tell them it's 4 weeks or 5 weeks because there's too much volatility in the market at the moment. Freight and insurance, who's paying that? Who's responsible? Is there insurance? Like, have you got marine insurance involved? Commodity codes. Have you checked your commodity codes to make sure the commodity codes are correct when they're going out there, and you know what the exposure is? And customs and delivery, clearance, sign clearance, and delivery duties. Who's doing that? Who's responsible for that? So again, making sure them key things are done. The Incoterms risk, as we always talk about, exports, buy controls, everything, DAP, seller carries major exposure, DDP high export. So, as a buyer, maximum exposure exports because they now have to do the export declaration. DAP, the seller, as in you, have more responsibility to deliver it to the door, but obviously then the customs and the duties paid by VAT or any taxes is paid by your importer. Nice and clean. DDP, please avoid it if you can. I understand if you have to do it within Europe, and you can use regime 1442, which we will talk about in other topics. But again, it's a high responsibility and can end up costing you a lot of money. So just be careful. Again, your quotation changes depend on responsibility. Choose Incoterms with precision. Make sure that Incoterms, you're very clear on who's taking what risk and who's taking responsibility. I can't say enough, and I know it sounds crazy, them 3-letter words, they make a huge difference. Look at the stats. Look at the stats around the world. What's the biggest challenge? Is understanding the risk. And the risk can be avoided very clearly if you understand your Incoterms. Very, very important. We did a webinar recently with the ICC, because I work with the ICC as a trainer and advisor. So again, these are key things to be thinking about. It's all about trust factor as well. I talk about this a lot. If you can do a professional structure, well-structured quote, signals credibility. The other side of the thing, he might be, quite new to this, but if he sees a very structured, he can then plan better because he knows exactly what your response, what your expectations are, what your quote is, what your payment terms are, what your lead times are, what your Incoterms are. He can then make a very clear decision. So again, be clear with your responsibilities. Who takes whatever obligations and reduces any disputes, because I can tell you if anything goes wrong, you begin a war. And if you're new to a customer, the chances are you could lose your contract overnight on the first shipment. So again, transparent pricing gives buyers confidence to commit faster because they understand exactly. And if they want it air freighted because it's urgent, they make that choice. But you're giving them options. You say, well, this is our normal standard terms. This is the quota based on. If you want it any quicker, please advise, but that cost will be to you. very clear. It's up to them then. They can make that clear decision. You're not saying you won't do it. You're just saying this is how we do our quotation and this is our policy as a company under our compliance. So again, make sure you export quote chest, Incoterms, commodity scores, rate, duty, currency, validity. So when I talk about valid, it's how long is it valid for? Very clear. Responsibilities defined, documentations required, confirmed. A complete checklist, is your first line of defense. I can tell you now, you get this right, your margins will stay profitable. You'll also grow your business a lot quicker because you understand the very key compliance areas that most people miss because they're too excited about getting sales. They get the sales, but actually the margins get eroded because the fundamental key areas are forgotten about in these checklists. So again, thanks for joining us today. Again, you can join. Please subscribe. That's all we're asking for. We're getting quite a nice following now on the podcast, but we need subscribers. That's all we want. We just want to see that it's worthwhile. We're seeing a lot more people now jumping on our podcast, which is great. And we just ask one thing: subscribe. It's free, or you can visit our homepage and see what we do. And remember, our weekly briefing is now on a Wednesday. There's a video last week's, and it talks all about. It's like a little news channel on that day where we'll talk about everything what we're seeing happening in the global trade in that week. It's we've moved it all into the YouTube, so you can either check the post if you want, so you can read the post, you can listen, or you can watch. It's entirely up to you. We're giving you them options. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on Monday for our next instalment of our podcast. And like I say, please enjoy. Please give us some comments. It's always nice. There's a lot of work goes into this, and it'd be nice just to get some comments because we feel we're doing it right, but obviously we might not be. So again, let me know.